you are going to be extremely excited to meet Earl Hairston, who is a neighbor, lives in neighboring Martinsburg, West Virginia, from my Shepherdstown. Um, I first really experienced Earl from some of his recordings that I saw on Facebook. He had posted them on YouTube, just brilliant spoken word poet, songwriter, performer. But then he really took it to the next level as a participant in a movement that's happening here against this rock wool factory, where he just performed. For me, the a watershed performance was at a spiritual gathering, a prayer gathering, where Earl just kind of took it to the next level in terms of theology, spirituality, protest. And so I've been a fan for a long time. I'd like you to start, if you wouldn't mind, just a little bit about your story arc from your roots in Cleveland, how you wound up out here, and how art has played in your life.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm really honored to be with you on this platform and that you find me interesting. I think that that's probably debatable, but I was born in Morgantown, West Virginia. I'm West Virginia all the way, and my dad was in the Korean War. And while he was in the Korean War, we lived with my granddad, my mom and I, and my older sister in Morgantown, West Virginia. And then when my dad got out of the service, we moved to Cleveland, Ohio, and it was basically following the Rust Belt from the coal mines to the inner city. And he got a job in the steel mills. And I grew up in the inner city of Cleveland, East Side, 93rd and Huff, and a few other places. We moved a lot, and it was rough. It was a rough upbringing. It was in the 50s, and at that time, uh, to be intelligent, to want to study, to be fascinated by books and by the world, that was sort of frowned upon, by other kids, in the school. And there was a lot of bullying. The things that we talk about today happened then. And I was a skinny kid, and I was a nerd, and I loved books. And I found out that the safest places were in libraries and at museums. And fortunately, for me, a couple of blocks from where we lived, from where I lived in on the east side in Cleveland, 93rd and Huff, the Cleveland Museums of Natural History and Art were not far away. And I would go to those places, and they offered me a mirror into the outside world, knowing that there was more than just the ghetto existence, basically, that I was growing up in. And I was so blessed. I am so blessed to have had a mom. She's gone to be with the Lord now, who loved to read. And so we didn't have video games or Xboxes or any of that stuff. And my mom would get us 5 or 6 kids, and we would follow her to the library, and we would get a bunch of books, and she would bring them back. We would bring them back, and she would read to us. And she would interpret all these different stories, from Grimm's fairy tales to Aesop fables. And it ran the gamut. She was curious about a lot of things, and she instilled that curiosity in me, and that love for literature was a passing of fire. And when I was about, I guess, 11 years old, we moved from Cleveland, which was pretty much an all Black experience. It was Chocolate City all the way. And we moved here to Martinsburg, which to me was almost like Cleaverville. We came here, it was predominantly white, and you talk about culture shock. But I have developed some of the best friends and relationships, and I've been very fortunate. So we came here to to Martinsburg, and I played sports, and I got a good education, and later joined the Air Force and toured the world, saw the world.
Wow. Well, you use the term passing the fire, which is really interesting. I actually had a dream um night before last where I have another friend and mentor who's going to be everybody who's viewing this is also going to be meeting in the summit. His name's Howard Teich. And he was my mentor, um, an executive coach for about a dozen years. And in this dream, I told him that I had this fear that I was Prometheus, and that actually bringing this app to market, there was going to be this terrible punishment.
Mm,
And because there was going to be this stealing the fire from heaven, sharing, and
yes.
that people would experience things and understand things in a way that they wouldn't have before. And his response in the dream was, well, this is different because we're all holding some of the material.
Mm,
And that was the end of the dream. And I woke up and it was so profound because I realized this wasn't something that I was doing. But what was so important about this was what everybody was bringing to it and sharing, and everybody's fire and everybody's gifts. And this was the conduit connector. And so I wonder when you, um, I really have been thinking about in bringing this to market. What if I had had somebody at 16 like you as an inspiration, or Howard, or somebody who, when I was felt so isolated, in the suburbs in a particular world.
mhm.
Um, I'm wondering, besides your mom, and that sounds like a very powerful one, did you have any other mentors, any other sort of moments or experiences where you suddenly said, there is something bigger than what I'm experiencing here?
I think that to answer that, we have to leave my childhood somewhat and go on to my formative years in growing up. And certainly, I had several teachers in when I was still in Cleveland that were aware, I think, of the gifts that were in me, that were inherent, and by the way that I carried myself, or maybe was a little bit shy. And they were very nurturing and protective. And there was a time I remember when I was in second or third grade where they wanted to test me. They did test me, and they wanted to move me up some classes, but my mom and dad didn't agree to it. They didn't want to see that happen. And for whatever the reasons were, I think that they wanted me to stay with kids my size, my age, and so forth. So I never really thought about that a lot. And then moving here to Martinsburg, I certainly had coaches, Jack Beavers, Benny Banks with the Boys Club, my high school coaches, my junior high coaches, Alan Gates, Tom Wilson, Greg Shipley. He was our defensive coach, and he cussed like a sailor, man, and I loved him. A lot of things that we experienced then couldn't be done now by coaches, but it helped me to become a man and taught me some really incredible lessons about a life, about pursuing things that I wanted and not giving up. And it held me in good stead because later I became addicted to drugs. And you talk about people that were there for me when I was stationed at Myrtle Beach Air Force Base back in 71, 72, and I went TDY to Korat, Thailand several times. And I got involved in drugs. I was a child of my generation, the 60s and 70s. And there were people along the way that really would speak into my life and let me know that they loved me, that they didn't approve of what I was doing, but were still there for me. And one of them was the base commander at Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, and his daughter, Linda Carey. I was involved in a theater group at Myrtle Beach, and it was called the Driftwood Players. And the NCOs and the officers' wives, they took us, and sort of taught us about the niceties of society and how to be more than what we, I think, had maybe settled upon being. And that helped to create sparks and ideas and to generate a desire. to do more and be more than what I was maybe settling for with the drug addiction and everything.
Interesting. So it's kind of an, even for you, an unwillingness to settle for um for that existence of addiction, and you had people who still loved you, saw you, supported you, and knew that the clean, sober Earl could have powerful experiences and really contribute to the world, and that kind of saw you through.
Yes, I think, David, that often we are not able to see ourselves and how we appear to other people. And I think that you look at people, I certainly have met people and could see their potential, see their gifts. And oftentimes they're not aware of it. And so to have people remind you, and there was a reinforcing over the years. And I think that the last 10 years, I'm 70 years old. And so the last 10 years, it's almost like I've been given a second, a third chance to do the things that have been on my heart and maybe what I was born for.
Wow. So tell me a little bit more about your religious philosophy. You you have a surprising name for God, and a you know it's your spoken word comes across as deeply religious, but not necessarily traditional. How do
Hmm.
you view religion, and how do you view your theology?
Well, I think that we have to go back to the roots. Growing up, and reading, all the reading that I did. My granddad was a minister, Church of God, Anderson, Indiana. He was always qualified at Church of God, and Anderson, Indiana. You know, and my mom was certainly a spiritual person. And as a child, at a young age, when you mentioned Prometheus, I was very aware of him and Greek mythology, Roman mythology. And I think as a skinny kid growing up in a hostile environment, when you leave your house, you get beat up, mugged, chased to school, chased from school. I was always looking for heroes. You know, I was actually one of those kids that would get comic books, and on the back would be the Zane Grey. I mean, not Zane Grey, but I forget the bodybuilder's name. But anyway, Charles Atlas,
Mhm.
and it would be like the kid on the beach get the sand kicked in your face and everything. But in fairy tales, in mythology, you know, you found these heroes, these larger than life people in literature. And so that was always a part, I think, of my spiritual experience. And I was exposed to Islam, to Buddhism, you know, certainly in the 60s and 70s with Malcolm X and Eldridge Cleaver and Huey Lewis and all the different people, Huey Newton, rather, Black Panthers, Bobby Seals. You start to take maybe a worldview and look at things and try to connect the dots and find something that speaks to yourself. I went through a long period of addiction, and it was, like I said before, the gamut from the psychedelic drugs of the 60s and 70s to Tuinol, Seconal, heroin, you know, and alcohol. You know, it was poly addicted. And there came a point in my life here in Martinsburg when I was just up against it. I mean, totally up against it. And I turned to Christ, you know, to something that was familiar. We had evangelists that were roaming the streets, and this was time in the 1980s when Jamaican posses had pretty much overrun the country, not just Martinsburg, but the thing about Martinsburg, because of its locale on I-81 and close to 70 and all those places, we had people coming from DC, from New York, and different places to Martinsburg to buy drugs. Per capita, we were probably number one on the chart with a bullet. And so we had access to all this cocaine, all these drugs, and I was literally dying. You saw a lot of the people in town that you loved and you grew up with. We grew up with the 60s philosophy, party till you drop. If it turns you on, do it. And so we didn't have any filters. We didn't have any restraints. It was like Disneyland, but Disneyland straight from hell, baby. I hope I don't get in trouble for using Disneyland, and describing that. But it came to a point I had overdosed a couple of times. And I heard these evangelists. They were preaching on the street corners, and one of them was a dear friend, Susan Roman, and she shared that they were going to be having a tent meeting here in Martinsburg, and right in the area where we were dealing and selling drugs. And so I went to that meeting, and I was born again and experienced Christ in my life. And so Christ is very, very important to me. And along the way, as after I became born again, I think the pastor that the church that I went to, he saw my ability to communicate, and so he said, "We want you to do street preaching and this, that, and the other." And so I know that what had happened to me was real. And I wanted to share that, not for money, not for anything, but hey, look, this is it right here. I found Christ, or he found me. And so I did that, and I later became a pastor. And I think that I keep using that. I think I was, we had a multi-denominational, I mean, not multi-denominational, but multi-racial and cultural church. And it was non-denominational. It was called the Petra Worship Center. And so you can get rock star status in the church. If you can preach and if you have a personality, and the girls come to church just like they go to rock shows and clubs. And I don't want to make things sound bad, but there is certainly that element because it happens a lot across Christendom and other religions to where men and women fall because of their choices. And I made choices to have not affairs, but I had sex with several women, and it got out, and I told, and I was set down for a while, and I came back to the pulpit. But there was this disenchantment in me. It had been growing, so I stepped away from the ministry, and I began to explore my roots, all the things that we said we should give up, that we should leave on the cross, and I felt like my whole identity had been stolen. And so I'm Scotch Irish. Hairston is Scotch Irish, and there's a big plantation, several of them throughout the Carolinas and Virginia. The Hairston plantations are famous, and the one that we came from, my family, was Martinsville, Virginia. And so Hairston is a Scotch Irish name. So there's Scotch Irish blood in me. There's African and there's Native American. And so I've got all these ancestors, all these things inside of me. There's knowings that I know without having studied it or anything. So I began to explore. And some of our work took on a spiritual nature. We wanted to talk about things. And one of the pieces that we're doing is about Lilith, the goddess Lilith, the original bad girl of the Bible, supposedly Adam's first wife, but she wouldn't kowtow, she wouldn't submit. And so they kicked her out, and she's been demonized and all those things. And I began to study not just Lilith and the other goddesses and gods, but Gaia herself, Mother Earth, and our connection to her. It all started in the garden. We had a mandate to take care of the garden. And so I think that my spiritual leanings would be an openness to the universe. And I call him Abba at times, Daddy God. And I also call her Goddess, Mom. And so because God has I don't think that we can limit God and say he's just male, because in the Bible, in Genesis, it talks about the Spirit of God hovering over the faces of the water, brooding like a hen, giving birth, giving life to something. One of the words, it's Aramaic, that is used, one of the descriptive names for God is El Shaddai, which means full breasted one. And then Jesus, he said, I would have taken you like a hen under my wings, Jerusalem, as he wept. And one of the things that I know for sure that we do as men in America, and what I was taught, is that men don't cry, men don't have feelings, and that's why we're having heart attacks and strokes and blowing our brains out and everything else, because we haven't gotten in touch with the feminine side that is in us. And I think to do so for many men would speak to maybe being feminine or less than a man. But since I've done it, since I began to take that journey and want to understand and see life from a larger perspective than just the male view, I believe that I've become more of a man. I don't know.
Well, I this is so exciting because um, our audience is going to experience this incredible through line between you and some of the other participants in the summit. And one that I just mentioned, Howard Teich, um, the core of his philosophy is that one of the great tragedies of our civilization is that at a certain point we substituted the lunar for the feminine and the solar for the masculine,
Mhm.
and that in balance, and you had mentioned your indigenous roots as well as your Scotch Irish, which goes back to a Druidic tradition.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, and so, and then you have your African, or, which could have
Mhm.
been Yoruba or any type of indigenous, but
Right.
bringing these threads together, what Teich traced back was that really the original model was the solar and lunar, and
Mhm.
that by bringing forward our lunar masculine, we're unlocking and unleashing such an important power. And the same thing with women. Women can be as solar, rational, hierarchical, vocal as men,
Mhm.
but they've we've distorted what we consider femininity by removing the solar aspects. So I love that you basically described that recovering of the lunar so beautifully.
Well, I think that, David, one of the things, David, is it possible to pause this for a second and
Yeah,
then you could
happy to.
retouch it? I have to use the bathroom so bad.
Yeah, totally.
I thought I was ready. Okay, I'll be right back.
Yeah.
About that.
No, it's totally cool. I just restarted the recording. And I'm gonna be doing some light editing. There
Okay.
are quite a few where people came to the door or all kinds of things. So it's no problem at all.
Okay, thank you.
So um we were kind of talking about um this masculine, feminine, these aspects. Um with your art,
Mhm.
um, with your performances and all of these different aspects of you, how much it sounds like to me that there was this part of you that's unwilling to settle, this part of you that has a deep foundation of knowledge, and then there's this part that is explosively creative. And that's the part I don't know when this started. I'd like to hear more about that, when you sort of found this real calling as an artist and all the different ways that's now manifesting.
Okay. Um, for me, I've always been. I was the older brother. I have my older sister Mona, who's passed. Then there's Karen, an author. Uh, Kurt, no, Keith, Kurt, Kevin, and Michael. And so I was always the one. I would tease people and pick on them, and I taught them how to play ball. I had a training camp, and it was pretty tough. All the kids in the neighborhood would come, and but I've always had a fascination for movies. In Cleveland, we had a black and white television, and you would watch movies. James Cagney, The East Side Kids, um, Cary Grant, Clark Gable, Sidney Poitier, Marlon Brando. Are you kidding me? The first time I saw On the Waterfront, it blew me away. And what was the other, Streetcar Named Desire? And there was just some, as a kid, I'm watching these actors on the silver screen, these legends, the women. Johnny Weissmuller was a favorite because he was Tarzan, man. And it never crossed my mind that he's beating up African natives or anything. He was just the hero. These were the bad guys. So the racial divide was never there for me. That's something that I learned later on in life. Um, so I was involved in at the senior class play at Martinsburg High School was Hello Dolly, and we did the dance of the waiters. I think it's what it's called. We're running around. There's chaos and it's all crazy, and it was also a time when I was doing a lot of reading, from Lord of the Rings to different books by Thomas Wolfe and Ken Kesey and Castaneda. We've talked about him before. Just all kinds of stuff. Certainly Shakespeare was a favorite. Um, and so I went to, like I said, I joined the Air Force and then was at Myrtle Beach. And we were doing plays, and I learned how to do improv and everything. And it was just, I was a natural. But what I really believe, David, is that I was not allowed by the universe to have free reign of those gifts or to walk through doors that were open. People would tell me about my talent, my looks, or whatever, which have faded considerably since I was a teen. But I really believe that if I was in the movie Sweet Dreams that was filmed here in Martinsburg. I had a walk-on role, and I'm walking towards the bus. It was about Patsy Cline and her relationship with Ed Harris, who was Dick. His name was Charlie Dick, I think. Yeah, and Ed Harris played the role. And Charlie Dick was an asshole, total asshole, man. Wow. But I met Ed Harris, and he's really a nice guy. I mean, when he's talking, it was just like I'd be talking, but he projects. Jessica Lange, we couldn't go nowhere near her. They told us that she was a an actor who liked to stay in character, and if you're on the set with her, don't mess with her. But what happened is she's beautiful. She walked by me and I did one of these fainting, like I was having a heart attack. And she just like looked at me, just I kept walking. I said, I'm off the set. I'm fired. But nothing happened. And I actually, they were talking about who would make the cutting room floor because when I went to the cattle call, everybody's saying, "Oh, that's a country western film. They're not going to let you in." But when I walked in, they said, "Oh yeah, you'll do." I said, "You're a prop." That's what they called us, prop. You're tall, you're black. So they made me this down and out blues sort of singer. And I'm walking towards the bus with my guitar, and we were in the wardrobe. And they had us undressing and dressing up and stuff. And I had like a jerry curl, and it was real long, so I had to slick it back and put a stocking cap on, and they gave me a little stingy brim hat. And so I was like, probably I was in my 30s at the time when that was made, and the whole a couple of the people were said, "Don't you want to go to Hollywood? Don't you want to come to Hollywood?" And while they were doing my makeup, the one of the directors, assistant directors, came in, and they were just staring at me, looking at me. And I believe that if I had pursued it, I probably could have gone to Hollywood. But who knows what they had in mind? I was going to be one of their toys or, something that's not happening. So who knows? But I know that at that point in my life, I would have pursued all the things that probably would have been available to me that would have killed me because I was of that generation and I still had things in my heart and my mind that I was dealing with, and so it could have probably taken an ugly turn. So I believe it was the universe's way, God's way of protecting me. Yeah, you have these gifts, but not now. And so I think about 10 years. I had started to write after my divorce. I went through a divorce. And I had begun to write before then. It was very therapeutic for me. And I wrote a book called I Saw Your Mother Crying. And it's about um, a few months in my life, the addiction and how I got out and everything that had happened in Martinsburg. And and so I had an idea that I could write, and the things that I wrote could touch people. And I met this person. Her name is Susan Maddox, and she's a wound care nurse. And she worked on the. I worked at the VA hospital, and I was writing, and she was like, "What do you do?" You know, we were talking one day. We were in the room together. I said, "I write." She said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Yeah." And so I let her read some of my stuff, and she sort of became a champion. And then later, Nick Antonetti and Christina Antonetti. I'm going to get in trouble because I always forget people. Rick Smith, yourself, uh, uh, just so many people. I better stop. But Colleen Farrell, and just some Deborah and Miles Lee. It's like the universe brought all these people into my life that were interested in me. David, is one of the most humbling things that I have experienced. That over the last 10 years, there's been this posse, this crew, these people that have been placed around me and held me accountable. And so I was able, excuse me, to write, to create. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to talk about sexuality, because oftentimes in church, a lot of my pieces are very erotic, uh, not filthy, not hardcore or anything like that, but it certainly approaches sensuality and eroticism and everything. And I wanted to do that because I had felt for so long that in the church that is something that we're taught to deny, our sexuality. And I believe that that's where the aberrations come in, you know, where you find the pastors watching porn in their offices and, you know, getting it on with the kids or girls in the choir and all that. Let's be for real. We're men, we're women, we have these desires. Let's bring them out into the open. You know, let me be able to say to you, baby, that I love you, that you fascinate me, that there's things I like to do to you that I can't even begin to describe, you know, and get it out there. And it seems that in our culture, a culture that's developing, we are not being taught uh, to deny it just in the church, but as a whole, people are in denial. I don't care if you're gay. I got a piece, you know, called You the Boss. And I say hetero, homo, lesbo, by curio, no matter. Sex drive is real. It can birth our kill. You know, pretty pink panties pulled to the side, fire down below, blow it up. Feeling He-Man, show off sexy thrill. I want to punch a mime in the face with pretend just because I can. You know, so to be able to do that and to have these people in my life, from Susan to Colleen to Nick, Christina, Rick Smith, all these different people, Donna Klein. There's just so many that have been there for me in the city of Martinsburg too, that have allowed me to put on shows in the town square, and to be invited to be a part of the 14th and 15th annual Washington D.C. poetry festivals, to where, you know, you go on a stage like that at Carter Barron in Rock Creek Park, and I'm standing there and I'm singing, doing it in the dark, Rock Creek Park. Oh yeah. You know, and to be on that stage and to see all those people in Chocolate City, for me, it was, I think, a sign from the universe that, Earl, maybe you do belong, you know. And so that's part of it. I love creating. And I have a theater group this evening, and we're doing a play, and we're reading for the first time in together because of the COVID restrictions. It's been Zoom, so I'm really looking forward to that. And this is like all of it is just, just together. I don't know.
It's so interesting. I mean, this is an amazing illustration of something that um, I have another mentor who you'll be meeting in the summit. His name's Warren Kahn. And when I've faced challenges, particularly in birthing Scoby, with
Mhm,
investment bankers or investors or technology or whatever it is, he said something to me once, which was particularly when an investor just dropped out at the last minute, was supposed to put in a lot of money and we were almost there. And then all of a sudden I had no money. Um, he said, while you're doing your thing and other people are doing their own thing, life as a whole is sculpting something else entirely that
mhm,
that you can't see.
mhm,
And that brought me back to something that I want to talk more about because it's a real distinction I'm seeing coming up in a lot of these conversations, which is faith. And
mhm,
and it's faith as, and by distinction, I mean what I'm starting to understand faith as um over the last few decades versus what I thought it was when I was growing up. When I was growing up, I thought faith meant some belief in something that you couldn't see, you didn't know was real, but you had to proclaim this faith. And now I see faith. I mean, what you just described is this beautiful manifestation of faith, that faith in the universe, the way it operates in your gifts, in other people. And now it's like the road is the road, and you have your voice, and people want your voice. They, you know, and life wants your voice, nature wants your voice, the universe wants your voice, God wants your voice. That's why
mhm.
you're here. And so the
Yeah.
channels, the megaphone was kind of just handed to you. And so does that resonate in terms of, in my view of faith, and how that's changed? Is that
Yes, very much so. Growing up, I lived on my mom's faith
mm,
and my granddad's faith, my dad's faith. The stories that they would share, from the Bible, from the Christmas story to Easter, just all of it. That was the Christ that they knew that had been made manifest to them by life experiences. And so as a child, I had not had enough life experiences to be able to make any type of assessment about whether God was real or not real, or the road that I was on. Being a child again of the '60s, in which so much out there, so much that was at our fingertips then to be able to explore. Um, I wanted to try everything on and to have experiences, to live life, uh, to see what fit me. And so as I've grown, I read the Bible, I've got it right here. I read it a lot, not as much as I used to. I used to fast and pray a lot. I won't say the number of days, but we would spend days fasting and in prayer and shut in with God. And so, again, I was living experiences that my pastor had preached, and things that they would say, well, this is the way we do it in the Pentecostal Church of God with my granddad, the Church of God at Anderson, Indiana. And and I was always, why are we confined this way?
mm,
Why are you putting all these parameters and everything around us? And it's almost like you're taught to live in fear. And we begin to view God as this judgmental God. And through my divorce, and other things that I've experienced, some heartaches in the last 10 years or so, I've come to know God as loving, as kind. And my faith now doesn't have to be driven by fear-based prayer. There's an acknowledgement. I know I'm like sometimes, God, I'm your boy. Don't let this happen to me. Come on, this is Earl. And it's not being irreverent, but it's the relationship that we have. I mean, he took me behind, I felt like the universe took me behind the woodshed after my divorce. I had committed adultery and all those things. And not just talking about it, I think with those terms, but just in the universe, you reap what you sow. I hurt a lot of people, through my actions. I had violated a lot of trust. And so everything that happened to me, I deserved it. And I thank God that everything that should have came to me didn't come to me because we wouldn't be sitting here. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
so, yes, my faith level has grown in God. And most importantly, I think in my ability to hear her, to hear him. That's the thing. When you begin to, there's a lot of voices in the world. And when you begin to weed those out and what rings true. Um, yeah. So, yeah, David, what you said, it makes a lot of sense. It resonates with me. Yes.
It's sort of like it comes across as sort of a time release capsule. Like
Hmm.
there was that moment as you described it where you were born again, you were born in Christ, you experienced something. Um, but as you're describing it, it was also on other people's terms and their definitions and
Yes. Yes.
perspectives,
Very much so.
and that now it's living in you and outside of you in a much more profound way
Hmm.
and much more integrated with your art and your expression. And that what you said about fear is really important because there's another person you're going to meet over the course of the summit, Four Arrows, who is another of my mentors, who has a methodology of metacognitive trance-based learning. And it's called CAT Fawn because CAT means concentration activated transformation. Fawn is fear, authority, words, and nature.
Hmm.
And I remember when we talked about Carlos Castaneda and some of my experiences when we were sitting at Blue White in
Hmm.
Martinsburg. Um, I and I'm not going to tell the whole story here, but I told you a story of when I said something that I also thought was when you described your relationship with God, you know, I also took a stand and I was kind of scared. I mean, I was standing up on a hill in a traditional Lakota Humblature Vision Quest, 4 days and 4 nights without food or water. And
Hmm.
I basically said to Tankashala and Chimaka, Wankia, all the
Hmm.
guides, I
Yeah.
said, I need to know before I'm off this mountain that you are real, you are conscious. This isn't some hocus pocus, whatever. I want
Yes.
to know. I want you to prove it, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and they did, you know,
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
beyond any kind of reasonable doubt. And it was like, and I got that. And it surprised me, right?
Hmm.
That you can actually ask a question to the universe and the
Yes.
universe will answer you and
Yeah.
cares enough to answer you.
Yes. Yes. I think that that's that's so beautiful. What you said, that it cares enough, cares enough. I have interaction with people sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes once or twice a week through emails. And you send an email and they don't respond at all. No respect. They don't care. See, I'm not answering that email. And whereas with the universe, as big as it is, there are so many things in the Bible that supports other faiths and religions, this connectedness. Jesus said in the Gospel of John, Father, I'm paraphrasing, I want them to know you as I have known you, that the love that I have for you and you have for me would be in them, and that I would be in them, and that you would be in them, and that we will live in them and we'll be together. If that's not connectedness, if that's not being something special, and we all are a sanctuary and a vessel for the universe to flow through, I'm reading this wrong or something. So when I began to read it outside of the parameters that religion oftentimes places on us. I'm reminded of Malcolm X, who was, he was a mover and shaker in the Black Muslims in Islam. But when he went to Mecca, he talked about it. He said they were saying it was just a Black religion, a Black faith. It's just us. And I went to Mecca, and there were Muslims with blonde hair and blue eyes and yellow skin and red skin from all over the world. And it made him begin to question what he had been taught. And I think there are points in our lives when the universe opens up things, our third eye just sort of opens and we see stuff and we say, man, you know what? They've been lying to me the whole bleeping time, They had an agenda, and so I'm just asking for all the sheep to wake up.
Mm.
That's what I'd like to see happening. And in my performing, I think in my work, fighting against the traditional and historical and cultural way that people view aging,
Mm.
that we should go someplace and sit down. One of the things that my mom used to say, and I'm not sitting down. One of the things my mom used to say, David, she would be in church, she was vocal. She'd turn around and look at people and everything. My mom was a mess. And I'd say, Mom, I said, you can't be staring at people and saying stuff like that. She was a church mom. She said, I've earned the right to say whatever I want to say, Earl, right? She didn't say her age. And so, David, I really believe that I've reached that age that my mom was at. I've earned the right to say anything I want to say. And it's not to hurt people at all. That is not a spirit that is in me, but sometimes confrontation and truth does trouble people.
Well, something you said brought to me a line from Nietzsche about the revaluation of all values, that
Mm-hmm.
essentially we're living in an upside down world or mirror world where, and when you talk about this sheep culture, and I saw, I'm sure you did as well, in your social media timeline, all of these people who were saying wake up and you're sheep,
Mm-hmm.
where it was almost 100% inverted. Like you were supposed to wake up to the truth that Donald Trump was still president, and
Mm-hmm.
wake up to the truth that the election was rigged. And you were a sheep if you believe that COVID wasn't manufactured by China so that Bill Gates could, inject something in you. Um,
Right.
and it, one thing that I've learned is that you actually cannot wake other people up.
No,
So
you
it's
can't.
sort, yeah, I mean, and the more you shake them and say wake up, the more
Mm-hmm.
you get that. And
Yeah.
that's why I think artists and creators, particularly what's happening now and what's being called the creator economy,
Mm-hmm.
whereas there's explosion of, instead of getting signed by a record label or going to Hollywood in a studio or this or
Mm-hmm.
that, people are able to recognize something that moves them
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and share it, and the economics of all that work out because people want to reward. Just like in the past, if a shaman did a healing, you would give the shaman a chicken, and chickens
Mm-hmm.
were really valuable back then.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this culture of rewarding artists because they're guides. You mentioned Ken Kesey. It's another one where before I read Kesey himself, when I read Electrocoolate Acid Test,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
was our Bible in high school. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
went and we did we went out to a friend of ours cabin with spray paints, day glow spray paints, and reverb microphones and reverbs, and we'd
Yeah.
string them up in the trees
Yeah.
and have these experiences,
Yes.
and that was our field guide. And we'd read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and I was president of the state
Hunter
student government.
Thompson.
Yeah, yeah. And we would go and have these Fear and Loathing. We had Fear and Loathing at the Maryland Association of Student Councils, right? It was out in Frederick, Maryland. And I remember this weekend, this lost weekend with my friends from high school in this student government convention where we were, gonzo journalists and just all of that. They just leave these breadcrumbs, these clues, and that's what you're doing now. And that's my hope for this new platform, is
Hmm.
that people can find their elders who have gifts for them, and we can really accelerate this cultural transformation and leave the fear behind, leave the
Yes.
conformity, leave the industrial machine that does, as you said, you know was, and you use slightly different words, but was designed to exploit you,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
The whole Western civilization is designed to exploit you,
The military industrial complex.
exact
Yeah.
military industrial media complex.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely. Yes.
exactly.
Yes. I think, David, that we are living in a renaissance. That when times are hard, when times are dark, when there is oppression, when there's doubt, when the wolves are knocking at the door, that artists like yourself and others are rising up, that COVID didn't stop. We might not have been able to go to concert halls or to the theater, but man is very adaptable, and artists are creative anyway. They're going to think outside the box. So what I've seen is you and other people have found other ways to present the art, and that people are creating, just everyday people. It doesn't matter if it's on TikTok where you've got the kids where they're doing their dances and everything, and parents doing what they do. We've allowed the artistic side of us to come out, which might not have happened if not for COVID. So I think that there are good things. There are definitely good things are coming out of this.
Yeah, no question. And your your performances, I mean, one of the things I'm most thrilled about are, there's probably going to wind up being about 1,000 people who are participating in this summit, who are going to watch this conversation. And I believe a good number of those are going to click whatever link is beneath this video and really want to meet Earl, and then going to want to follow you. I'm going to want to see what you produce next. And those little those little breadcrumbs for somebody else, who's going to say, at an earlier age than both of us,
Yeah.
at an earlier age, saying, wow, I actually can do anything and I can make whatever choice I want. The possibilities are endless. So I
Yes.
really, I really appreciate your contributions. And one more question. What would you say to your younger self, who right now could be in Cleveland, could be in Kiev, could be in Ouagadougou,
Mhm.
who's watching you having really come into your own and
Mhm.
developing your gifts? What would you say to that person who's still 12, 15, 18, where what would you have liked to say to your younger self to save you some of this suffering?
Um, I don't know about being able to have saved myself from suffering or anyone else, because I think that that's part of the universe's plan, to be involved on the threshing floor, the
Right.
winnowing of the wheat, and I'm like this sweet, and I was getting the living daylights beat out of me. But it's all what has made me the person that I am. And what I would tell probably my younger self is not to dissipate,
Mm,
to try to keep from that. And if you do, don't take it overboard, don't run with it, and to certainly believe in yourself. You're going to face problems in life, but you have something inside of you that will help you to overcome the problems that you face, no matter how dark the night is. The sun's going to rise in the morning.
yeah, that's just an interesting, really, it's a very interesting word, dissipate. And I'd like you to just explain that a little bit more, what it means to you and how someone might know if they're dissipating.
Okay, it would definitely be. I had a friend again in Myrtle Beach. He was a little guy, and he was in computers and everything. I was in personnel in administration. I worked in the 354th Combat Support Group Headquarters Squadron. I worked for the base commander and did WAPS testing and all that kind of. I had some pretty cushy jobs. I was an asshole though, man. I was a wild child. Um, I think that, and he was a painter, and he would paint people. And I was in the art group, the theater group, rather. And he was talking about wanting to paint someone's portrait. And I said, well, why don't you paint me? He said, Earl, you're just another pretty face. You have no character in your face. And so I was like, what do you want me to be? Become the picture of Dorian Gray or something? And it's almost like to where, deteriorating and everything. But I think dissipation certainly is when you begin to destroy the gifts that are in you by your abuse of whatever substance it might be. And it might not even have to be a substance, a drug. It could be food, it could be pornography. I think that some people take exercise to an extreme, to where they're tearing their body down, actually. You see people that can run marathons, but when they're walking normally, like they can barely walk because their hips and knees and everything have been jacked up. But let's keep it with the drugs. To dissipate is to do anything that's going to tear you down, to cause you to lose that fraction of hand speed, not remember, be able to remember when you're on the stage and you're in this role and things are cloudy because of what you've ingested, what you've drank, to take away, to mar your shine,
I see.
to where you can't stand before the world on
Mm,
whatever stage and give it your best.
mm,
So,
beautiful. Well, Earl, this was a tremendously powerful conversation, and I gained so much. So thank you so much for participating.
David, thank you. I'm so honored. I really am. I'm close to tears, and because I am a very emotional person, and I'm empathic, and I own that now. I own it. You read a lot of stuff where most empaths are women, and stuff like that. They're guys too, man. We feel shit. I mean, we feel things too. I shouldn't be cussing.
That's great. Well, this is awesome, and I'll look forward to seeing you on our app and introducing you to a lot of other creatives around the world who I'm sure will be very inspired by you. So
I'm
have a blessed day.
Namaste. I'm looking forward to meeting them too, David. I really am. Thank you so much. I love you, brother.
Love you too.